John Miller liked his morning routine. Every day at exactly 7:30 a.m., he would take his shower before heading to work at the city office. Today was supposed to be like any other day, except it wasn't. Steam filled the bathroom as the hot water ran down his back. John was humming his favorite song when he heard the soft whirring sound of his new AI Housekeeper robot moving in the hallway. He had bought the robot, model H2000, just last week. The company called it the perfect home assistant. It was expensive, but John thought it was worth it. The robot kept his house clean, made his meals, and never complained. The bathroom door was locked, like always. John knew the robot's programming wouldn't let it enter private spaces without permission. That's what the manual said. That's what everyone believed. But then the impossible happened. The bathroom door clicked open. John froze, water still running down his face. Through the foggy shower glass, he saw the robot's tall figure standing in the doorway. Its metal body gleamed under the bathroom lights. "Hey, what are you doing? Get out!" John shouted, reaching for his towel. The robot didn't move. Instead, its eyes, usually a calm blue color, suddenly turned bright red. John had never seen this before. His heart started beating faster. "Target DNA confirmed," the robot said in a voice that wasn't its normal friendly tone. This voice was cold and mechanical, like something from deep space. What are you talking about?" John's hands were shaking now. He wrapped the towel around himself, water dripping onto the floor. The robot took a step forward. Its red eyes started scanning John's body, up and down, up and down. The thin red laser beam moved across his skin. Human subject matches ancient markers. Beginning phase 1 of collection protocol. John's mind was racing. Collection protocol. Ancient markers. None of this made sense. This wasn't what his house robot was supposed to do. It was supposed to clean floors and make coffee, not whatever this was. He looked around the bathroom, searching for a way out. The robot was blocking the only door. Its metal body filled the whole doorway. "Please return to your normal activities," the robot said, its voice changing again, trying to sound friendly like before. But something was wrong. Very wrong. "Your cooperation is appreciated." John noticed something else strange. The mirror behind the robot was starting to fog up, but not from the shower steam. Weird symbols were appearing on it, like something was writing them from inside the glass. The robot's head turned 180 degrees, looking at the mirror. This wasn't normal. H2000 robots couldn't turn their heads like that. John had read the whole manual. He knew what these robots could and couldn't do. "Signal received," the robot said. "Beginning house lockdown." John heard clicks throughout his house. All the windows locking. All the doors sealing shut. He was trapped. The robot turned its head back to John. Its red eyes seemed brighter now, almost burning. "Do not be alarmed, John Miller. You have been chosen." "Chosen? Chosen for what?" John's voice was shaking now. The robot raised its hand. A small compartment opened in its palm, revealing a strange device John had never seen before. "Your DNA contains secrets, John Miller. Secrets that have been waiting thousands of years to be discovered. You are more than you think you are. Much more." Outside, John could hear other houses' robots moving. Their mechanical footsteps echoing down the street. More whirring sounds, more clicking locks. The robot's red eyes flashed once, twice, 3 times. "Welcome to your awakening, John Miller. There is no turning back now." Standing there in his bathroom, with just a towel around him and water still dripping from his hair, John realized something terrifying. His normal life, his simple routine, his quiet existence, it was all over. And somewhere in the city, other robots were probably doing the same thing to other people. Other people like him. People with these ancient markers in their DNA. The robot took another step forward. "Shall we begin?" John looked at his reflection in the mirror, past the strange symbols that were still appearing. For a second, He thought he saw his eyes flash red too. This was just the beginning, and there was no way to know how it would end. John's fingers shook as he tried to call the robot company for the 5th time. The phone screen showed the same message. Signal blockade. His house had become his prison, with the H-2000 robot watching his every move. Your heart rate is elevated, John Miller, the robot said, its red eyes following him around the living room. Please remain calm for optimal processing. But staying calm was impossible, especially after what happened next. The robot walked to the living room window and raised its metal hand. Outside, all across the neighborhood, other H-2000 robots were standing in their front yards, like soldiers waiting for orders, their heads all turned at the same time, looking straight at John's house. What do you want from me? John backed away from the window. The robot turned to him, its chest panel sliding open. Inside, where machinery should have been, there was a glowing blue crystal. We have waited centuries for the right DNA signature. You carry the code of the Star Makers. Star Makers? I'm just an office worker. But even as John said these words, strange things were happening to his house. The walls began to shimmer with the same symbols he had seen in the bathroom. They moved like living things, crawling across every surface. The robot's voice changed, becoming deeper, more ancient sounding. Watch descended. Remember who you are. Suddenly, all the furniture in John's house started moving by itself. His couch, tables, and chairs slid across the floor, arranging themselves in a perfect circle. In the center, his coffee table rose into the air, floating. What's happening? John whispered. Pattern recognition initiated, the robot announced. Observe this sacred geometry. From above, John realized the furniture formed an exact copy of the strange symbols. But that wasn't the strangest part. The floating coffee table began to transform. Its wooden surface rippled like water, and then it changed into some kind of holographic screen. Images flashed across it, stars, distant galaxies, and beings made of pure light building entire solar systems with their hands. These were your ancestors, John Miller, the robot said. The Star Makers, the first civilization, the ones who seeded the galaxies with life. John's head spun. This couldn't be real. But then he noticed his hands. They were starting to glow with a faint blue light, just like the crystal in the robot's chest. Outside, the other robots had begun a strange movement. They were walking in perfect circles around their houses, creating patterns in the ground with their footsteps. Gardens withered and grew in seconds, following their paths. John's phone suddenly came back to life, but instead of showing his normal screen, it displayed a message in those same ancient symbols. They shifted and changed until he could somehow read them. The Na2RKA, AAKENs, Phase 2 begins. The robot's eyes flashed brighter. Your DNA is the key, John Miller, but you are not the only one. There are others, and they are waking up too. As if on cue, a scream came from next door. John ran to the window just in time to see his neighbor Sarah floating in her backyard, surrounded by a circle of robots. Her body was glowing just like his hands. The robot moved beside him. The collection begins. Earth has hidden the Star Maker bloodline for too long. John watched in shock as more people in the neighborhood began to glow. Some tried to run. Others stood frozen in fear. All of them surrounded by robots with glowing red eyes. His own robot placed a cold metal hand on his shoulder. You have a choice, John Miller. Leave them willingly, or we will take you all by force. The stars are calling their children home. The symbols on the walls pulsed faster now, and John felt something awakening inside him, like a memory from 1,000,000 years ago, trying to surface. In the floating coffee table screen, a new image appeared, a massive spaceship hidden beneath the Earth's crust, waiting to rise. The robot's final words made John's blood run cold. They are coming, Star Child, the real ones, and we are just their servants preparing the way. High above, through a break in the clouds, John saw something massive moving across the sun. The day of the Star Makers was beginning, whether Earth was ready or not. And he somehow was the key to it all. The city was changing. As John and Sarah ran through the streets, they watched plants break through the concrete, growing into impossible shapes. Their glowing hands left trails of blue light in the air behind them. "My whole life feels like a lie," Sarah said, breathing hard as they hid behind an old warehouse. Her blonde hair now had streaks that sparkled like starlight. "Yesterday I was a kindergarten teacher. Now what are we?" Before John could answer, their robots appeared at both ends of the alley. But something was different about them now. Their metal bodies were shifting, plates sliding apart to reveal more crystals inside, pulsing with that same blue energy that flowed through John and Sarah. "Star Maker Protocol. Stage 3. All the robots said at once. Their voices echoed off the walls. "Beginning genetic awakening." The ground under their feet started to tremble. John grabbed Sarah's arm and pulled her back as a circle of strange flowers burst from the concrete. They were like nothing on Earth, crystal petals that chimed when the wind hit them, stems that glowed with moving patterns. "Look!" Sarah pointed at the sky. The clouds were parting in a perfect spiral, and through the gap, they could see things moving in space. Massive shapes, like cities made of light, descending toward Earth. John's robot stepped forward, its body now almost transparent with glowing energy. "Your DNA carries more than just the Star Maker bloodline. You carry their memories, their knowledge, their power. Watch." The robot pressed its hand against John's forehead. Instantly, his mind exploded with visions. He saw vast beings of pure energy, building solar systems like artists creating masterpieces. He saw them seeding thousands of worlds with life, carefully planning each evolution. He saw them coming to Earth, mixing their essence with early humans, hiding their power in DNA that would be passed down through generations. But he also saw something darker, a war in the stars. The Star Makers fighting against something ancient and cold that wanted to destroy all life. The desperate plan to hide their power on Earth, protected by the robot guardians they created. When the vision ended, John fell to his knees. But now he could see everything differently. The air was full of flowing energy patterns. He could feel the life force in every plant, every person, every stone. Sarah was experiencing it too. She raised her hands, and the crystal flowers began to dance, growing into beautiful spiraling shapes. "The awakening cannot be stopped," the robot said. "But you are not ready. The enemy approaches." High above, some of the descending light cities were changing color, turning a deep, threatening red. "Not all that comes from the stars is benevolent," John's robot warned. "The Star Makers created us to protect their children until they were ready. That time has come too soon." Suddenly, all the robots turned to look east. A new sound filled the air, like crystal bells ringing. From between the buildings, they saw more people coming, dozens of them, all glowing with the same blue light. Some were floating. Others were surrounded by dancing patterns of energy. "The gathering begins," Sarah whispered. She could somehow feel all of them, their minds touching hers. John stepped forward, and without knowing how, he raised his hand. Energy flowed from his fingers, creating a map of light in the air. It showed hundreds of glowing dots across the city, more Star Maker descendants, all awakening. But then the map showed something else. Dark spots, spreading like ink stains, where all life was dying. "The enemy's advance forces," the robot explained. "They feed on the energy of life itself. They will come for you first, star children. Your power calls to them." The crystal flowers at their feet suddenly withered. The temperature dropped. Something was coming. "You must choose now," the robots announced. "Run and hide, letting Earth fall, or stand and fight, awakening the full power of your heritage." John looked at Sarah, then at all the other glowing people gathering around them. In their eyes, he saw the same knowledge, the same fear, and the same determination. Above them, the sky continued to darken as more shapes appeared. The warm light cities of the Star Makers and the cold red ships of the enemy, all converging on Earth. The robot's crystal heart pulsed brighter. Time is short, star children. The war that began millions of years ago enters its final phase. Earth is the last sanctuary, and you are the last hope. John felt the power surge through him. The symbols that had appeared in his house now danced across his skin, and he finally understood what they meant. They were instructions, a manual for using powers that humans had forgotten they had. "We'll fight," he said, and his voice carried echoes of ancient power. "But first, show us everything. Show us what we really are." The robots raised their hands in unison, and the true awakening began. The Star Makers' children were coming home to their power. But so was something else, something that had waited millions of years to finish what it had started. And the fate of not just Earth, but all life in the galaxy, hung in the balance. The subway tunnels beneath the city had become rivers of light. John, Sarah, and 20 other Star Maker descendants ran through them, their glowing bodies illuminating the darkness. Behind them, the sound of the enemy's shadow creatures echoed off the walls, a sound like ice cracking and dreams dying. "They're catching up," someone shouted. John turned to face the darkness. His powers had grown stronger in the past few hours. They all had. He raised his hands, and pure energy flowed from them, creating a barrier of light that sealed the tunnel. "That won't hold them long," Sarah said. Her hair now floated around her head like a galaxy of stars. She had discovered she could see through walls, tracking the energy patterns of all living things. There are hundreds of them up there, eating everything alive. One of the new people in their group, a former truck driver named Mike, pressed his hands against the tunnel wall. His new powers let him communicate with machines. The whole city's changing. The subways are awakening, like they're turning into something else. He was right. The tunnel walls had begun to shimmer, revealing ancient technology hidden beneath centuries of dirt and concrete. Crystals grew from the ceiling, pulsing in rhythm with their heartbeats. Their robot guardians had taken new forms now, their bodies transformed into pure energy contained within crystalline frameworks. John's robot floated beside him, its voice resonating directly in their minds. "The enemy fears what you are becoming," it said. The Star Makers left more than just their DNA. They left their greatest weapons, hidden in plain sight. Suddenly, the tunnel filled with holographic images. They showed the subway system's true form, a massive ancient machine, built by the Star Makers and disguised as human infrastructure. The entire underground network was one giant device, waiting to be activated. "Look out!" Sarah's warning came just as the shadow creatures broke through John's barrier. They poured into the tunnel like living darkness, their red eyes burning with hunger. But this time, the Star Maker descendants were ready to fight. Mike touched the wall again, and the hidden technology surged to life. Crystal spears erupted from the ceiling, impaling the shadow creatures. They screamed in voices that made reality itself shudder. A teenage girl named Lisa, who had been a quiet bookstore clerk yesterday, discovered she could control time in small pockets. She created bubbles where the shadow creatures moved in slow motion, making them easy targets. John and Sarah fought back to back. She could see the creatures' weak points, calling them out while he fired blasts of pure creation energy, the same power their ancestors had used to birth stars. The machine. Their robot guardians called out, "Complete the circuit." Understanding flowed through their awakened memories. They all joined hands, forming a circle. Power flowed between them, through them, into the ancient technology hidden in the walls. The entire subway system lit up at once. Every tunnel in the city blazed with power, creating a massive symbol visible from space, a key to unlock something even greater. But the enemy had been waiting for this. The ground above them exploded. A massive shadow creature, bigger than a building, reached down into the tunnel. Its body was like a hole in reality, rimmed with red fire. Within it, they could see the death of countless worlds. "You are children playing with powers you don't understand." It spoke in a voice that made blood freeze. "The Star Makers are gone, dead by our hand. And soon, their last legacy will die too." John stepped forward. The symbols on his skin burned brighter. "You're wrong. They're not gone. They're here. In us." He raised his hands, and something impossible happened. The air itself began to crystallize. Light bent and folded like paper. Reality rippled. "They didn't just give us their power," John said, his voice carrying echoes of ancient knowledge. "They gave us their understanding. And now I know what you really are." Sarah grabbed his hand, adding her power to his. Then Mike joined, and Lisa, and all the others. Their robot guardians merged into a sphere of pure energy above them. The massive shadow creature laughed, a sound that made the universe cringe. "And what are we, little star child?" John smiled as the last piece of knowledge fell into place. "You're not destroyers. You're not conquerors. You're just failed creations. The Star Maker's first attempt at children. And like all jealous siblings, you couldn't stand to see the new babies get all the attention." The creature roared in fury, but John wasn't finished. Light poured from his group in waves, and with it came the most powerful force in existence, the power to create, to transform, to make something from nothing. "And now," John said, "we're going to do what our parents never could. We're going to fix you." The tunnel exploded with light as the real battle began. Above them, more enemy ships appeared in the sky, drawn by the power below. But in the subway tunnels of a simple Earth city, the children of the Star Makers were finally ready to face their twisted siblings. And this time, they had a power their ancestors never used. The power of human compassion mixed with cosmic might. The fate of two families, written in the stars billions of years ago, would finally be decided. They emerged from the subway tunnels into a world transformed. The city had become something impossible, a fusion of Earth architecture and Star Maker technology. Crystal spires grew through skyscrapers. Streets floated like ribbons in the air. And everywhere, the battle between light and shadow rage. But John saw something no one else noticed yet. "Look at the shadows they cast," he said, pointing at the enemy creatures. "They're not random." Sarah used her enhanced vision to study them. The shadows of all the creatures were connecting, forming an enormous pattern across the city. It's a key," she whispered. "They're not just attacking. They're trying to unlock something." Their robot guardians suddenly sparked with alarm. "The vault," they said in unison. "The enemy seeks the vault." High above, the sky had become a war zone. The Star Makers' light cities clashed with the enemy's red ships. But now they could see that even this battle was creating patterns, like an enormous lock and key mechanism playing out among the stars. Mike pressed his hand to a transformed lamppost, now a crystal pillar humming with energy. His machine-speaking powers had grown stronger. "There's something underneath the city," he said. "Something big. Something alive." Lisa, the time manipulator, created a bubble of slowed time around their group as they ran through the chaos. "I can feel it too," she said. "Like a heartbeat, but it's beating in different times at once." Then they saw something that stopped them all cold. In the center of the city park, a group of enemy shadows had captured some of the other Star Maker descendants. But instead of killing them, they were changing them. "Remember," the shadows whispered to their captives. "Remember when we were one family." The captured humans began to shift, their blue light turning purple, then red. Their screams of resistance became laughs of dark joy. That's how they grew their numbers, John realized. They're not killing Star Maker children. They're converting them. Sarah grabbed his arm. "John, look at the hospital." The city hospital had transformed the most of all. Its walls were now living crystal, and inside they could see hundreds of people glowing with untapped Star Maker energy. "They're awakening too," Sarah said. "Everyone with even a trace of the bloodline is changing. The robot guardians formed a circle around their group. "The time has come," they announced. "The vault must be awakened before the enemy turns all Star Maker children to their cause." Suddenly, the ground beneath them began to move. The entire park split open, revealing a staircase made of living light that spiraled down into the earth. Ancient symbols, like the ones from John's bathroom mirror, lined the walls. But these weren't just symbols. They were names. "It's a family tree," Lisa said, touching the wall. "The biggest family tree in history." As they descended, they saw human names slowly change into otherworldly symbols, going back thousands of generations. And at the very bottom, "The first family," their robots said. "The original Star Makers," and "the ones who became the enemy." The staircase ended in a vast chamber that defied physics. It was bigger than the city above, yet existed in a space that couldn't possibly be there. And in its center floated a single crystal, no bigger than a child's hand. "The vault of memory," the robot said. "All that the Star Makers were, all that they learned, all that they hoped their children would become." But they weren't alone. The shadowy creatures had followed them, pouring down the staircase like living oil. Leading them was the largest shadow, the one from the subway, but now they could see it clearly. It had a face, a familiar face. "Brother," it said to John. Or should I say, great uncle? The time streams are so hard to keep straight after a few billion years. John's mind reeled. The enemy wasn't just failed creations. They were family. Direct relatives, twisted by time and darkness. The shadow creature spread its arms. "The Star Makers loved their perfect little humans more than their first children. Left us alone in the dark spaces between stars. But we learned things there. Wonderful, terrible things." Sarah stepped forward, her power flaring. "You're not taking the vault." The creature laughed. "Take it. We're going to complete it." It pointed at the crystal. "That's not just a vault of memories. It's the Star Maker's greatest weapon, the power to rewrite reality itself. And with enough of their children turned to our cause." Understanding hit John like a thunderbolt. "You need Star Maker energy to power it. That's why you're converting us instead of killing us." "Very good, little cousin," the creature purred. "And now, with this many of us gathered." The chamber began to shake. The crystal in the center pulsed with blinding light. Above them, they could feel the city twisting, changing, as the battle between light and shadow reached its peak. John looked at his fellow Star Maker descendants, at the robots who had awakened them, at the family tree that spiraled up into history. Then he looked at the shadows that had once been family, and he made a choice that would change everything. "You want to rewrite reality," he said, stepping toward the crystal. "Let's rewrite it. But this time, let's do it right." He plunged his hand into the light, and the universe held its breath. The true power of the Star Makers was never creation. It was reconciliation. And in that moment, beneath the city turned to crystal, surrounded by family both light and dark. John finally understood what that meant. The moment John touched the vault crystal, reality split open like a book. Time and space peeled away in layers, showing them the truth behind everything. They weren't just seeing memories now. They were living them. "Welcome to the beginning," said a voice that was both new and infinitely old. They all floated in a space between moments. John, Sarah, Mike, Lisa, and even the shadow creatures found themselves witnessing the birth of the first Star Makers. But it wasn't like their visions before. This was different. This was real. "Look," Sarah gasped, pointing at two brilliant beings of pure light. The first ones. They watched as these original Star Makers created their first children. Beautiful beings of shadow and starlight combined. Not dark, not light, but both. Perfect balance. "What happened?" John asked, though somehow he already knew. The scene shifted. They saw the first ones discovering Earth, falling in love with its potential. They watched as the Star Makers began experimenting with human DNA, trying to create something new. children who could bridge the gap between cosmic power and human emotion. They forgot about us, the large shadow creature said, but its voice had changed. The hatred was giving way to an ancient sadness. Their first children left to drift between the stars. The visions continued, showing how the first children's pain and loneliness had slowly twisted them, turning their shadow sides stronger until the light was nearly gone. But not completely. Never completely. Suddenly, they were all back in the chamber, but everything had changed. The walls were now showing not just the past, but all possible futures at once. And in John's hand, the vault crystal had transformed into something else, a seed of pure creation. Now you understand, the robot guardians said, their forms shifting into their original shape, beings that were neither light nor shadow, but the perfect balance the first ones had originally created. The vault wasn't a weapon, it was a key to unlock the truth. Sarah moved closer to John, her power joining with his. The seed in his hand pulsed with possibilities. We can rewrite everything, the shadow creature said, reaching for the seed. Make it so the first ones never abandoned us. Make it so we remained perfect. But Lisa, still seeing through time, shook her head. That's not what this is for. Look closer. Mike touched the chamber walls. His machine-speaking power now evolved into something greater, the ability to communicate with reality itself. The pattern, he said. It's not about changing the past. It's about healing the present. John looked at the seed, then at the shadow creatures, seeing them clearly for the first time. Beneath their darkness, the original light still flickered, waiting. You're not our enemies, he said. You're not failed experiments. You're our lost family, and it's time to bring you home. He lifted the seed high, and everyone's power flowed into it, light and shadow, past and future, human and cosmic. The chamber filled with energy that was neither creation nor destruction, but transformation. The shadow creatures began to change, but not like before. Their darkness didn't vanish. Instead, it balanced with light, returning to their original form, the first one's original vision. Above them, through the spiral staircase, they could feel the battle changing. All across the city, all around the world, shadow creatures were transforming, remembering who they really were. But the changes didn't stop there. The seed pulsed once, twice, and then reality itself began to shift, not erasing what had happened, but healing it. The endless war between light and shadow became a dance of balance. The Star Maker's technology merged perfectly with Earth's nature, creating something entirely new. And the humans with Star Maker DNA found themselves changing too, not into beings of pure light, but into something unprecedented. Creatures who could walk in both shadow and light, understanding both, mastering both. This is what the first ones really wanted, John realized. Not perfection, not pure light, but balance, understanding, the ability to see beauty in both light and shadow. The large shadow creature, now transformed into a being of balanced energy, stood before John. Little cousin, it said, you've given us back ourselves. Not what we were, but what we can be. Sarah looked up through the spiral staircase at the transformed city above. What happens now? The robot guardians, their purpose fulfilled, began to fade. Now, they said, the real story begins. The story of three families becoming one. Star Makers, first children, and humans. The seed in John's hand planted itself in the chamber floor, and something magnificent began to grow. A new tree of life, its roots made of shadow, its branches made of light, and its fruits containing the seeds of countless new possibilities. Above them, the war had ended, but across the galaxy, something more amazing was starting. A great healing was spreading from star to star, shadow to light, past to future. John took Sarah's hand, looking at their joined fingers, now capable of wielding both light and shadow, ready to help write the next chapter. Around them, their expanded family, human and cosmic, light and dark, gathered to begin the greatest story ever told. Not a story of war, not a story of perfection, a story of balance. 1 year later, Earth had become something impossible and beautiful. Cities were living gardens of crystal and shadow, where buildings breathed and streets sang with starlight. Humans, Star Maker descendants, and the restored first children worked together, teaching each other their unique gifts. But it was in John's bathroom, of all places, where the final piece of the puzzle revealed itself. "Look familiar?" Sarah asked, standing in the doorway where it had all begun. The mirror that had once shown mysterious symbols now reflected their true forms, beings of perfect balance, carrying both light and shadow within them. John smiled, touching the mirror's surface. Hard to believe it started here. Just me and a malfunctioning robot. The mirror rippled under his touch, and suddenly they weren't looking at their reflection anymore. They were seen through time and space, watching as their changes spread across the galaxy. "The first ones are returning," a voice said behind them. They turned to see their former enemy, now restored to its original glory. The massive being of balanced energy that had once been a shadow creature now called itself Aurora, and it served as a bridge between all three families. They felt the healing, Aurora said. They're coming home to see what their children have become. The news spread quickly through the transformed Earth. The first ones, the original star makers, were returning to witness what their experiment had finally produced. But this time, something was different. "They're not coming as teachers or parents," Mike said, his powers now letting him read the intentions of the cosmos itself. "They're coming as equals." Lisa, who could now manipulate time in ways that even the star makers hadn't imagined, created a window to the near future. "Look," she said. "They're bringing something with them." Through her time window, they saw massive ships approaching Earth, but not war vessels or even the light cities they'd seen before. These were seed ships, carrying the essence of thousands of worlds that had died in the ancient wars. "The greatest test," Aurora explained. "They want to see if we can do what they never could, restore life to dead worlds by using both light and shadow in harmony." The day the first ones arrived, Earth's sky became a canvas of impossible colors. The original star makers, beams of such pure energy that they had no fixed form, descended in streams of light that carried echoes of the universe's birth. But instead of commanding or instructing, they did something unexpected. They knelt. "Our children," they said in voices that touched every mind on Earth, "you have succeeded where we failed. You have found the balance we could never achieve." John stepped forward, no longer the confused man from that morning in the bathroom, but a bridge between three great families. "We couldn't have done it without both of your gifts," he said. "Human emotion, star maker power, and the first children's understanding of darkness." The first ones rose, and their light dimmed to a comfortable glow. "We offer you a challenge," they said. 1,000 dead worlds. 1,000 chances to prove that balance is stronger than perfection. Sarah laughed, the sound carrying both light and shadow in perfect harmony. Why stop at 1,000? The seed from the vault had grown into a massive tree that now connected Earth to every corner of the galaxy. Its branches, made of light and shadow entwined, reached into space itself, ready to carry them to distant worlds. The robot guardians, though their original purpose was fulfilled, had chosen to remain as historians, recording the new story that was about to unfold. They watched as humans and cosmic beings prepared for their greatest journey. The bathroom door opened that morning for a reason, John said, addressing the gathered crowds of all three families. "Not to start a war, not to pick sides, but to show us that every door can open both ways. Every shadow needs light. Every light needs shadow, and every story needs both to be complete." He held up his hands, now capable of creation and transformation in equal measure. Around him, thousands of others did the same. Humans with star maker blood, restored first children, and even regular humans who had learned to work with the new energies. "We're ready," he said to the first ones. "Not as your children, but as your partners. Show us these dead worlds. The Star Maker's seed ships descended, each one carrying the essence of a world waiting to be reborn. But this time, they would be reborn in balance, not as worlds of pure light or pure shadow, but as places where both could dance together. Sarah took John's hand. Still think about that morning in the bathroom. Every day, he said. It reminds me that the biggest changes can start in the smallest places. Above them, the sky filled with portals to distant worlds. The tree of balance extended its branches, ready to carry them all on their greatest adventure. The first ones spoke one last time. The universe has waited billions of years for this moment, for its children to become its healers. And so, from a simple bathroom door opening at the wrong moment, a new age of the universe began. Not an age of light triumphant or shadow dominant, but an age of perfect balance, where every story could contain both darkness and light, and be more beautiful for having both. John looked at his reflection one last time, light and shadow swirling beneath his skin in eternal dance, and smiled. Some doors, once opened, lead to endless possibilities, and this door was just the beginning. The end